The stepmother forced her stepdaughter into an engagement with a beggar to shame her. But on the wedding day, everyone was shaken by a secret that the beggar revealed. The scorching sun of New York beat down relentlessly on Fifth Avenue, where Liam, a 28-year-old man with messy hair and ragged clothes, sat on the sidewalk. His green eyes, once bright with life, were now dulled by fatigue and hunger. The sharp outline of his ribs beneath his worn shirt showed the toll of many hungry days. Liam watched the frantic movement of people around him, feeling almost invisible in the bustling crowd. His stomach let out a painful growl, reminding him that it had been over 2 days since he last ate. "Just one more day, Liam. Someone's bound to notice you today," he muttered under his breath, trying to hold on to hope. But a bitter voice inside reminded him, "Who am I fooling? No one ever looks at a beggar twice." The hours stretched on slowly, and Liam fought back the urge to search nearby trash cans for scraps of food. He had promised himself he wouldn't sink to that. But hunger was a fierce opponent. His eyes couldn't help but follow each person holding bags of food or cups of coffee, the aroma of hot dogs from a nearby cart torturing his senses, making his mouth water and his stomach ache even more. Maybe I should try that shelter again. No, I can't, he thought, shuddering at the memory of his last experience there. How did it come to this? If only things had been different. If only I'd had a family, a home, he reflected, his mind drifting painfully to memories of the past. As the afternoon dragged on, Liam's despair deepened. He saw other homeless people approach strangers, asking for spare change, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. His pride, the one thing he had left, held him back. An older man sitting nearby looked at Liam with a mixture of sympathy and understanding. "Kid, sometimes it feels hopeless, but we survive," the man said, his voice rough from age and years on the streets. "I know," Liam replied, his voice wavering between hope and doubt. "But it's hard to believe things will ever change. We're given a few coins by the kind-hearted, but what we really need are jobs, housing, a chance at something better." Just then, as if some unseen force had heard his silent plea, a middle-aged woman stopped in front of Liam. Without a word, she handed him a paper bag, the warmth from a fresh sandwich radiating through it. The smell of fresh bread and roasted meat hit his senses, making his stomach tighten with anticipation. Liam looked up at the woman, his eyes filled with gratitude. Trembling with anticipation, Liam looked up at the woman, his eyes welling with gratitude. "Thank you, ma'am. You have no idea what this means to me," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. The woman gave him a gentle smile and walked on, leaving Liam in awe of the kindness she'd shown. Maybe there's still goodness in this world. Maybe I'm not completely alone, he thought, feeling a small flicker of hope light up in his heart. As Liam began to savor the precious sandwich, his gaze drifted to 2 other men sitting nearby. Their thin faces and hollow eyes mirrored his own struggle. Without a second thought, he divided the sandwich into 3 parts, offering it to his companions. "Here, guys, let's share. No one should go hungry if we can help each other," he said, his voice raw but kind. Across the street, 2 women watched the scene. Emma, a young woman with long brown hair and gentle blue eyes, felt a deep ache in her heart as she witnessed Liam's act of kindness. She stepped forward, determined to do more for him and the others, but suddenly felt a sharp tug on her arm. Celeste, her stepmother, a middle-aged woman with sharp features and an icy glare, was holding her back. "Don't you dare, Emma. I won't have you mingling with those kinds of people," Celeste hissed, her gray eyes flashing with anger. "But Celeste, they need help. How can we just ignore them?" Emma replied, her voice shaking with a mix of compassion and frustration. Celeste pulled Emma back with a firm grip, her high heels clicking sharply on the pavement as she led her toward a luxury boutique nearby. The contrast between the sparkling storefronts and the grim reality on the street was jarring. Emma resisted, her gaze lingering on Liam and his companions. Celeste whirled around, her face twisted in disgust. "Have you lost your mind, Emma? Those people are dangerous. They'd probably waste any money you give them on drugs or alcohol," she sneered, her tone harsh and dismissive. "You don't know that, Celeste. That man just shared the only food he had today. How can you be so heartless?" Emma retorted, her voice trembling with righteous anger. Their argument drew curious glances from passers-by. Normally reserved, Emma felt a rare surge of courage swelling within her. She broke free from Celeste's grip and took a determined step back toward the street. "They're human beings, Celeste. They deserve compassion, not judgment," she declared, her voice gaining strength and resolve. Celeste gripped Emma's arm tightly, her manicured nails digging into her stepdaughter's skin. "You don't understand how the world works, darling. These people chose this life. It's not our responsibility to save them," Celeste said, her tone dripping with condescension. "No one chooses to go hungry or to live on the streets. How can you be so heartless?" Emma shot back, tears of frustration welling in her eyes. Summoning her resolve, Emma managed to pull away, breaking free of Celeste's hold. Without a moment's hesitation, she crossed the street to where Liam and his companions sat. Her hands shook slightly as she pulled some cash from her purse. "Please, take this. I hope it can help, even if just a little," she offered, extending the money toward Liam. Liam looked up, surprised and deeply moved by her kindness. Their eyes met, and in that brief connection, unspoken words of gratitude and understanding passed between them. "Thank you, miss. You don't know what this means to me," Liam replied, his voice thick with emotion. "It's nothing, really. I just wish I could do more," Emma murmured softly, feeling both grateful and yet powerless to change their circumstances. Across the street, Celeste watched the exchange with a mixture of anger and something else, a calculating expression. Her gray eyes narrowed, focusing intently on Liam. There was something about him that intrigued her, something that went beyond his rough appearance. A scheme began to take shape in her mind, a plan that could solve several of her problems all at once. As Emma returned to the sidewalk, she steeled herself for the inevitable confrontation with Celeste. Yet to her surprise, Celeste didn't scold or berate her as expected. Instead, a cold smile crept onto her face. "Well, since you seem so determined to help these people, perhaps I should teach you a lesson about them." "Wouldn't that be fitting?" Celeste suggested, her tone laced with sarcasm. "What are you planning, Celeste?" Emma asked, feeling a chill of unease at her stepmother's sudden shift in demeanor. Celeste cast a final calculating glance at Liam, her eyes glinting with a sinister determination as an idea solidified in her mind. Emma, still bewildered by Celeste's unexpected reaction, didn't notice the look on her stepmother's face. Her mind was occupied, replaying the brief but meaningful exchange she had just shared with Liam. There was something about him, a quiet dignity and warmth, that stood in stark contrast to his circumstances. "That young man? There's something different about him, don't you think?" Celeste remarked offhandedly, her voice carrying a note of unsettling interest that sent a shiver down Emma's spine. "Why the sudden interest, Celeste?" Emma asked, unable to mask the suspicion in her voice. "Interested, Celeste? Just a few minutes ago, you were insisting I ignore him completely," Emma responded, unable to mask the suspicion in her voice. They arrived back at the mansion, where Celeste stormed through the front doors, her heels echoing sharply against the marble floor. Emma followed in silence, still uneasy about the afternoon's events. Richard, alerted by the commotion, emerged from his office, his brow furrowed with concern. Celeste wasted no time with pleasantries. "Richard, your daughter is out of control. Today, she nearly mingled with beggars in the street." "Beggars!" Her voice rang through the hall, thick with indignation. Richard turned from Celeste to Emma, his face a mixture of confusion and disappointment. "Emma, is this true?" he asked, his voice weary. "Father, I was just trying to help someone in need. I don't understand how that could be wrong," Emma replied, her voice trembling slightly but firm with conviction. Celeste grabbed Richard's arm and led him into the office, slamming the door behind them, leaving Emma standing outside. The muffled sounds of their argument seeped through the solid wood of society. Celeste hissed, gesturing wildly, her eyes flashing with frustration. Richard sank into his leather chair, running a hand over his face in a gesture of exhaustion. "Celeste? She has a good heart. We can't fault her for that," he replied weakly. "In this world, Richard, a good heart is a weakness we can't afford," Celeste snapped, her voice as sharp as a blade. The argument escalated, with Celeste listing all of Emma's recent offenses: donations to charities without permission, volunteering in poor neighborhoods, refusing to attend high society events. Richard listened in silence, his face growing paler with every word. "She's undermining everything we've built, Richard. our social standing, our connections. All of it is at risk because of this fixation she has on helping the needy, Celeste continued in a furious whisper. But she's my daughter, Celeste. I can't change who she is, Richard protested, though his voice already held a note of resignation. Celeste stopped pacing and turned to face Richard, a dangerous glint in her eyes. I have a plan, she declared, her voice suddenly cold and composed. Richard straightened in his chair, instantly wary. He recognized that tone and knew it rarely led to anything good. What kind of plan? He asked, his voice laced with caution. A plan to teach Emma a lesson, Celeste responded, a cold smile spreading across her face. Silence fell over the office, thick and foreboding. Richard looked at Celeste, a blend of fear and reluctant curiosity in his eyes. He knew he should stand up for his daughter, but years of Celeste's control had worn down his will. What exactly are you proposing? He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Celeste leaned forward, her eyes glinting with a nearly manic intensity. That beggar Emma was so determined to help. What if we use him to show her that people like him aren't as noble as she imagines? Let her see, up close, just how low they can go, she said, her tone laced with malice. Celeste, what are you suggesting? Richard asked, a chill of apprehension creeping down his spine. Celeste stood up abruptly, casting a shadow over Richard as she moved to the office window, her gaze fixed on the perfectly maintained garden outside. A sinister smile tugged at her lips. Marriage, Richard. We'll force Emma to marry that beggar, she declared, her voice filled with cruel satisfaction. Richard choked on his drink, his eyes widening in shock. You've gone mad, Celeste. That's monstrous, he exclaimed, rising to his feet. Monstrous? No, it's necessary. Think about it. What better way to show Emma the harsh reality than by making her live with someone like him? Celeste replied, her voice cold and calculating. Richard began pacing the room, his hand running through his graying hair in despair. But what about her happiness? My daughter deserves better than this, he argued, his voice determined despite his growing concern. Celeste turned to face him, her eyes shining with unyielding resolve. Happiness? We're talking about her future, Richard. Imagine the looks, the whispers. Emma needs to learn the consequences of her reckless choices, she said, each word dripping with conviction. This isn't right, Celeste. My daughter would never be ashamed of a humble man. She has a good heart. She wouldn't be fazed by this. Don't you think? Richard protested, a hint of pride in his voice as he thought of Emma's strong character. Celeste laughed, a cold, humorless sound that echoed through the office. Oh, Richard, do you really think she could handle it? She may have a kind heart, but she's still a girl who's never known real hardship. Still a girl raised in luxury. Just a few days with that beggar and she'll be begging to come back to her senses, Celeste scoffed, dismissing Richard's concerns with a wave of her hand. Richard leaned heavily against his desk, the weight of Celeste's proposal clear in his weary posture. And the young man? How do you plan to convince him to go along with this? He asked, his voice full of doubt. Money, of course, Celeste replied confidently. We'll offer him an amount he can't refuse. In his situation, it'll be irresistible. Silence fell once more, thick with tension. Richard stared into the distance, his mind a battleground of conflicting emotions. His love for Emma clashed with the fear of social repercussions. I don't know, Celeste. This seems like too much. Can't we just talk to her? He finally murmured, doubt heavy in his voice. Celeste stepped closer, her tone softening, but still firm. Richard, words aren't enough. Emma needs to see the reality for herself. Sometimes we have to be harsh to protect the ones we love, she argued, her voice a blend of persuasion and false compassion. Yes, but forcing her into marriage, playing with her life like this, there must be another way, Richard protested, his gaze revealing the turmoil he felt. He slowly stood up and walked over to the window, gazing out at the world beyond, a world that seemed so complicated and full of traps for his beloved daughter. With a heavy sigh, he turned to Celeste. This won't end well, Celeste. You're underestimating Emma and the strength of her convictions, he murmured, genuine concern coloring his tone. Celeste, irritated by Richard's lack of support, crossed her arms, her eyes flashing with frustration. Your hesitation is exactly why Emma is out of control. Sometimes tough decisions are necessary. You're her father. It's your job to teach her to protect her reputation. she argued sharply. The sun was beginning to set over the city park, casting shades of orange and pink across the sky. Liam sat on a worn-out bench watching people pass by. When an elegant figure approached him, Celeste, in her designer coat and high heels, looked distinctly out of place in the humble setting. She stopped in front of Liam, her cold gaze scanning him from head to toe. "You're the beggar who was here earlier, aren't you?" "I'm Celeste, Emma's stepmother, the woman who was here with her," she said, her voice laced with thinly veiled disdain. Her voice held a blend of disdain and forced politeness. Liam stood up, confused and slightly defensive. "Yes, that's me. My name is Liam. What do you want, ma'am?" he replied, his voice rough from long days of silence. "I have a proposal for you, one that could completely change your life," Celeste declared, a calculating smile spreading across her face. Without delay, she outlined her plan, an arranged marriage with her stepdaughter, Emma, promising him a life of comfort and luxury in return for his cooperation. Liam listened, his eyes widening with every word. "You're asking me to marry your stepdaughter, the kind woman who helped me today? For money?" he asked, incredulous. Celeste nodded, her smile unyielding. "Think about it, Liam. You'd never have to worry about food or shelter again. You'd have everything you've ever wanted," she insisted, her voice as smooth and tempting as a serpent's. Liam shook his head, resolute. "I can't do this. I can't use someone like that, especially someone who was kind to me," he said, refusing the offer. Celeste's expression tightened, but she kept her composure and decided to take a different approach. "Think about the difference you could make with this money, Liam. You could help so many people. Your friends on the streets, the ones who go hungry every day," she suggested, her voice low and persuasive. Liam hesitated, his hands balling into fists as he considered her words. Images of his street companions, hungry and desperate, floated through his mind. I could really make a difference," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "Imagine how many lives you could change. Isn't that what Emma would do? Use her resources to help others?" Celeste pressed, sensing his hesitation. As Liam mulled over the proposition, his gaze drifted to the brooch pinned on Celeste's coat, a delicate design of a rose interwoven with vines. Something about it stirred a distant memory, a faint recollection of a long-lost moment. He reached out instinctively, almost touching the brooch. "This brooch, I've seen it before," he murmured, his voice shaking with sudden emotion. Celeste stepped back, surprised by his reaction, her hand moving protectively over the brooch. "It's just an old family jewel, nothing important," she replied quickly. Liam frowned, trying to piece together fragments of a memory from a time he could barely recall. "Strange. I'm sure I remember it. A woman was wearing it, she was singing to me," he thought, struggling to make sense of the hazy images from his distant past. "Shall we?" Celeste prompted, eager to steer him back to her plan. "Go on, Liam. I'm sure you'll be able to help many with this decision," Celeste urged, gesturing for him to follow her. He nodded, glancing back at his street companions with a promise in his eyes. "Don't worry, I'll come back for you all. I'll find a way to help," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Moments later, as he sat in a luxury car with its rich scent of leather, Liam couldn't shake the strange familiarity of Celeste's brooch or the surreal nature of her proposal. "I hope I'm making the right choice," he murmured to himself, his fingers nervously tapping on his knee. "If this can really help others, maybe it's worth it." Minutes later, Celeste's sleek car passed through the towering gates, gliding up to the grand mansion. Liam, seated in the back, stared in awe at the imposing building. Meanwhile, Emma, reading by her bedroom window, heard the car pull up. She glanced outside, her eyes widening in shock as she saw Liam step out, looking out of place and visibly uneasy in his worn clothes. "What is going on? Why would Celeste bring him here? This can't be good. Did she do something to him?" Emma murmured, her heart pounding with a sense of foreboding. Celeste led Liam into the house, casting a significant glance at Emma, who was still watching from the window. "Wait here," she instructed Liam, leaving him standing in the entrance hall as she climbed the stairs with determination. Celeste reached Emma's door, knocked once, and then entered without waiting for a response. "Emma, darling, we need to talk," she announced, her voice dripping with forced sweetness. Emma turned to face her stepmother, her expression a mixture of confusion and apprehension. "Celeste, what's going on? Why is that man here?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. All will be clear soon, my dear, but first, have a seat. There's much we need to discuss, Celeste replied, gesturing for Emma to sit at the edge of the bed. Reluctantly, Emma sat, her eyes never leaving her stepmother's face. Celeste began to pace around the room, her heels echoing ominously against the wooden floor. Emma, your obsession with helping those less fortunate is starting to worry your father and me. We've decided that it's time for you to learn a valuable lesson about the realities of the world, Celeste began, her tone dripping with false concern. Emma felt a knot tighten in her stomach. What are you talking about, Celeste? She asked, dreading the answer. Celeste turned to face her, a cold smile on her lips. I'm talking about consequences, dear, and a marriage. Marriage? Celeste replied, a cold smile playing on her lips. The shock hit Emma like a punch, and she stood up abruptly, her hands shaking. Marriage? What marriage? She demanded, her voice rising in disbelief. Celeste stopped pacing, turning to face Emma directly. You're going to marry the beggar downstairs, Liam. The same man you were so eager to help today, she declared, savoring each word. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. This is insane. You can't be serious, she shouted, her voice echoing through the room. Oh, but I am, my dear. Very serious. And before you start refusing, let me explain the consequences of disobeying, Celeste threatened, her tone dropping to a dangerous whisper. Emma staggered back, collapsing onto the bed, her mind spinning as she tried to process the absurdity of what she was hearing. All I did was help someone in need. How could that be wrong? You can't force me to do this. It's illegal. It's immoral, Emma argued, tears of frustration beginning to blur her vision. Celeste stepped closer, leaning down until she was face to face with Emma. Oh, I can, and I will, unless you want to see your new friend face some very serious charges. Imagine if the police were to find something incriminating in his possession. Wouldn't that be tragic? Each word dripped with malice. You wouldn't. He's innocent. He's done nothing wrong, Emma stammered, her heart racing as the full weight of Celeste's threat sank in. Why are you doing this? What could you possibly gain from this cruelty? Celeste straightened, her smile cold. What do I gain? A daughter-in-law who finally understands her place in this family and in society. You're going to learn, Emma, that actions have consequences, and that not everyone you try to help deserves your compassion. Emma felt trapped, her gaze drifting to the window where she had watched Liam arrive earlier. The thought of him suffering because of her made her heart ache. And if I agree, what happens to Liam? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He will have a comfortable life, far from the streets. And you, my dear, will learn a valuable lesson about the real world, Celeste replied, her tone almost motherly, but underpinned by a chilling coldness that sent a shiver down Emma's spine. Liam, meanwhile, was escorted to an opulent bathroom attached to his new quarters. His eyes widened as he took in the marble bathtub and the meticulously arranged toiletries. Everything you need is here, the butler informed him, gesturing toward the soft towels and grooming products. Nodding, still dazed by the surreal turn of events, Liam stood alone in the luxurious room, grappling with the unsettling future that awaited him. Liam turned on the faucet, watching as hot water filled the tub. How long has it been since I've had a real bath? He murmured, slowly peeling off his tattered clothes. Will all this grime even come off? Do I still remember how to take a proper bath? A blend of anxiety and anticipation washed over him as he stepped into the steaming water. A sigh of relief escaped him as he sank into the warmth, years of dirt and hardship beginning to dissolve. Grabbing a soft sponge and scented soap, he scrubbed vigorously, watching the water darken, a silent testament to the years he had spent on the streets. Liam stayed in the tub until the water cooled, savoring each moment of cleansing and comfort. It's like being reborn, he whispered, marveling at his clean skin for the first time in years. Who would have thought a simple bath could make me feel human again? A wave of emotion swept over him. Wrapped in a soft towel, he stared at his reflection in the fogged mirror. His beard was thick and unruly, obscuring much of his face. With trembling hands, he picked up the razor and shaving cream. Slowly, carefully he began shaving, each stroke of the blade peeling away more than just hair. It felt like he was shedding the life he had endured on the streets. When he finished, Liam barely recognized the man staring back. My God, is that really me? He whispered, touching his now smooth cheeks. It's like looking at a stranger from the past. He dressed in the new clothes left for him, feeling like an imposter in the soft, well-tailored fabric that was such a stark contrast to his usual rags. He adjusted the collar of the shirt, uncomfortable with the unfamiliar sensation of being dressed up. Taking one last look at himself in the mirror, Liam took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. You can do this. With a life like this, you'll be able to help so many, he told his reflection, trying to convince himself. As he descended the grand staircase, Liam felt all eyes turn toward him. Emma stood at the bottom of the stairs, and her eyes widened in shock when she saw him. For a moment their eyes met, and the world seemed to stop. Liam? I almost didn't recognize you, she whispered, her voice a mix of surprise and something unspoken. Just then Celeste appeared, casting a disdainful glance in Liam's direction. Ah, excellent. I see you've cleaned up well at least, she remarked, her tone dripping with false approval. Liam nodded, unable to find the right words as they moved toward the dining room. He couldn't help but notice Emma's lingering gaze on him, a look that made him feel oddly exposed in a way even life on the streets hadn't. What is she thinking? He wondered. Why is she looking at me like that? The days passed in a whirlwind of hurried preparations and growing tension. Now, as she sat in the chair of a luxurious beauty salon, Emma gazed at her reflection while the hairstylist worked on her intricate bridal hairstyle. Though sadness clouded her eyes, they held a glimmer of silent determination. Her hands rested lightly on the white dress in her lap as her thoughts turned to Liam and the remarkable transformation he had undergone in the past few days. He must be feeling just as lost as I am, she thought. Maybe this marriage could be an opportunity to truly help him, to finally make the difference I've always wanted. Emma murmured to herself, her heart tightening with empathy as a small smile crept onto her lips. The hairstylist, noticing her thoughtful expression, tried to lighten the mood with casual conversation. Are you excited for the big day, miss? She asked gently. Emma hesitated before replying, It's complicated, but I'm determined to make the best of it. Her gaze met the stylist's in the mirror, her thoughts drifting to the quiet moments she'd shared with Liam in the past days, the hesitant conversations, the shy smiles, the gratitude in his eyes. He deserves a chance to rebuild his life, she reflected. Maybe, together, we can find a greater purpose in all of this. As the stylist put the finishing touches on her hair, Emma's thoughts turned to the countless people in need, people like Liam. Maybe I can use my position, even in this arranged marriage, to make a real difference, she mused. Are you satisfied with the look, miss? The hairstylist asked, interrupting Emma's thoughts. It's perfect, thank you, Emma replied, this time with a genuine smile. This could be the start of something important, she thought, feeling a renewed sense of determination. At that moment, Emma caught a snippet of a hushed conversation between two nearby staff members. That's Celeste's stepdaughter, isn't it? Do you remember that scandal involving her stepmother? One of them whispered. The other nodded, leaning in. How could I forget? They say she was involved in something terrible. They never proved anything, of course, one woman whispered. But their conversation abruptly stopped when they noticed Emma's gaze in the mirror. They quickly backed away, looking guilty. Emma's heart raced. Something terrible? What was Celeste involved in? She wondered, a chill running down her spine. Sometimes I wonder if she really is who she claims to be. She says she was thrilled to join our family, but she acts as though she resents me. The staff member's words echoed in Emma's mind, blending with her own observations over the past days. She recalled the vague way Celeste avoided discussing her life before marrying her father, Richard. There was a puzzle there, and Emma felt a deep resolve to uncover it. Walking over to the salon window, she looked at her reflection. A bride, yes, but also a woman with a purpose. I'm going to find out the truth. If Celeste is hiding something, I'll uncover it, she vowed silently, her expression hardening with determination. Hours later, as the afternoon sun bathed the grand facade of the church, luxurious cars began to arrive one by one. Liam, dressed in a suit that felt foreign against his skin, stood nervously at the entrance, watching the high society guests step out, each eyeing him with barely concealed judgment. Their whispers filled the air, and words like beggar and scandal reached his ears. A feeling of dread settled in his stomach as the reality of the situation struck him. How did I end up here? Why do they all look at me like that? He wondered, adjusting his tie for what felt like the 100th time, his eyes scanning the crowd for any hint of kindness. An elderly couple passed by, the woman unable to mask her look of distaste. Dear, did you hear? Celeste said he was living on the streets just last week. What a disgrace for poor Emma. She whispered, loud enough for Liam to hear. Her husband nodded, casting a disapproving glance at Liam. They say it's some kind of punishment, but to embarrass the family like this, associating with someone like him? Emma must be out of her mind, the man replied. The words hit Liam like a punch, and he felt the blood drain from his face. So that's it. I'm just a tool to humiliate Emma, he thought, the realization filling him with both anger and shame. How could I have been so naive? Each whisper and judgmental look only intensified his discomfort. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed Celeste, standing at a distance, greeting guests with a polished smile. She occasionally cast triumphant glances in his direction, as if relishing the spectacle she had orchestrated. Celeste's smile was a carefully crafted facade, but every now and then she shot Liam a triumphant look that made his blood boil. He clenched his fists, barely resisting the urge to confront her right there. A gentle hand touched his shoulder, startling him. It was Richard, Emma's father, his face a mix of pity and guilt. Liam. I'm sorry for all of this, Richard murmured, his voice barely audible. Before Liam could respond, Richard had already slipped back into the crowd, seemingly another victim in Celeste's twisted game. Even her father seems trapped in this scheme, Liam reflected, his mind racing. Then, an elderly gentleman approached him, leaning on an ornate cane. His eyes widened as he took in Liam's features, shock and recognition crossing his wrinkled face. It can't be, the man whispered, studying Liam closely. For the first time, Liam felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this man wouldn't judge him for his past. The elderly man glanced around cautiously, as if afraid of being overheard, and leaned in. Young man, I need to speak with you in private. It's urgent, he whispered, his voice trembling with an urgency that made Liam's heart race. Of course, sir, Liam replied, intrigued. Is something wrong? He asked, his voice low. The elderly man cast another wary glance around. Not here. Meet me at the back of the church in 5 minutes. There are things you need to know, he said, moving away as quickly as his cane allowed. Liam stood still, his heart pounding. The pieces of the puzzle are finally coming together, but what could he possibly know? He thought, his mind swirling with possibilities. Shortly after, the elderly man revealed everything, leaving Liam shaken. He returned to the church, the atmosphere thick with tension as guests began to settle into their seats. Standing at the altar, Liam felt his heart pounding as he replayed the old man's words in his mind. The revelation had changed everything, yet he remained focused. I'll go through with this for Emma's sake, he resolved, though a storm of emotions churned within him. The Reverend cast a concerned look at Liam, noticing his tense expression. Is everything all right, young man? He whispered. Liam nodded, clenching his jaw with determination. I need to stay strong. Emma deserves to know the truth, but not like this, not here. I won't leave her at the altar, he thought, his resolve solidifying. Bearing the weight of his newfound knowledge, Liam nodded to the Reverend, saying, Everything's fine. Just then, the music began, and all eyes turned toward the church entrance. Emma appeared, radiant in her wedding dress, yet her eyes betrayed a mix of fear and determination. Each step down the aisle seemed to cost her dearly, as though she was walking toward an unknown fate. Celeste, seated in the front row, watched with a smile of satisfaction that now appeared dark and sinister to Liam. If she knew what I know now, everything would change when the truth is revealed, he thought, his gaze fixed on Emma. When she reached the altar, their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them, a shared resilience, uniting them against the greater force looming over them. Reverend James began the ceremony, his words echoing through the church, but for Liam they sounded distant, overshadowed by the truth he now held. Hold on, Liam. Everything will come to light when the time is right, he reassured himself. The ceremony continued, each word from the Reverend heightening the tension in the air. Finally, The pivotal moment arrived. "If anyone has a reason why this marriage should not take place, speak now or forever hold your peace," announced the Reverend, and a profound silence fell over the church. Liam felt his entire body tense, the truth burning within him, desperate to be revealed. He fought the urge to speak, holding back, knowing there was a larger plan in motion. At that exact moment, breaking the silence, Celeste abruptly rose to her feet. "I have something to say," she declared, her voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. Liam's heart nearly stopped, his eyes widening in shock. "What is she doing? Could she possibly know that I've discovered the truth?" he wondered, panic beginning to rise. Celeste strode down the center aisle, her heels echoing ominously in the stunned silence. Her face held a cruel smile as she positioned herself in front of everyone, next to the altar. "Dear guests," she began, her voice dripping with feigned sweetness, "I believe it's only fair that everyone knows the truth about this wedding." Her gaze turned to Emma, who stood frozen, her face pale with shock. "This young woman," Celeste continued, pointing at Emma, "thought she could disregard our social standing by associating with the lowest of society. And here you see the result of her misguided compassion." Emma felt tears prick her eyes, but she refused to let them fall, standing resolute despite Celeste's assault. "Celeste, please," Emma whispered, her voice trembling, "don't do this." "It's too late for pleading, dear," Celeste responded, her tone sharp as a blade. "You brought this on yourself." She turned back to the congregation, her arms outstretched in a theatrical gesture. "Look, my friends, this is the bride who chose to marry a beggar, a man who until last week lived on the streets, dirty and starving." Murmurs of shock and disapproval rippled through the church. Liam stood still, his fists clenched tightly at his sides, anger simmering within him as Celeste continued her ruthless monologue. "This is what happens when someone forgets their place, when they disregard the traditions and expectations of our society," Celeste proclaimed. Finally, Richard stood up, his voice trembling with anger. "Celeste, that's enough. How could you do this to my daughter?" he demanded, his outrage clear. "Your daughter?" Celeste laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "She chose this path, Richard. Now she must face the consequences." Emma's face flushed with humiliation, but a new resolve sparked in her eyes, replacing her initial shock. She took a step forward, ready to confront Celeste, but before she could speak, Liam moved. He stepped forward, placing himself between Emma and Celeste, his gaze fierce and unwavering. "Enough. Enough of your lies, Celeste," he said, his voice low but steady, silencing the entire congregation. Celeste took a step back, momentarily stunned by Liam's sudden intervention. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed, her confidence faltering. Liam looked her squarely in the eyes, the weight of her secrets about to be exposed. "Telling the truth you've hidden for far too long," he replied, his voice gaining strength. The silence in the church was thick with tension as Liam took a deep breath, preparing for the revelation that would change everything. Finally, he spoke, his voice clear and firm, echoing through the church. "The time for truth has come, Celeste. You thought you could bury the past, but it always finds a way to resurface. My real name is Hudson Howard, though it feels strange to me now after years spent using the name given to me on the streets. That's the name I was baptized with. I am the son of Jonathan Howard, your first husband." The congregation gasped, and Celeste's face paled. "A few minutes ago," Liam Hudson continued, "an elderly man came to me and shared a story. Though my memory of it is faint, it resonated deeply within me. He spoke of a child, the son of a wealthy man, who mysteriously disappeared years ago. That child was me." Liam Hudson paused, his voice steady as he scanned the stunned faces in the congregation. He recognized my birthmark, the very same one Jonathan Howard's son had before he vanished. When he learned about my life on the streets, he pieced everything together. "Celeste, you were my father's second wife. When he died under suspicious circumstances, you inherited everything. But that wasn't enough, was it? I was a threat, the legitimate heir who jeopardized your newfound wealth and status." Liam's voice was calm, yet each word struck like thunder. "So you made a choice that changed both our lives. You abandoned me in a nearby town, effectively erasing me from your carefully crafted life. I was too young to remember much, and everyone believed the story you fabricated about my disappearance, the disappearance of Hudson Howard. He paused, the memories flooding back painfully. I lived on the streets for years, never knowing why I felt so out of place in this world. But something always pulled me back to this city, as if I knew unconsciously that I belonged here, even if I couldn't remember why. He glanced at Celeste's brooch, his gaze steady. That brooch you always wear, I remembered it. I recall holding it as a child. It was all I had to cling to when you left me on the street, far from everything I knew and loved. You didn't recognize me when you saw me there, did you? He asked, his tone both bitter and triumphant. How ironic, Celeste, that you despise beggars so much when deep down they remind you of what you did to me. Every time you saw one of us, you saw the boy you left behind. Liam turned to Emma, who stood frozen in shock at the revelation. Emma, your kindness, your compassion. Those were what gave me the strength to face this truth. That day on the street, your generosity helped me remember who I was and to confront what I'd lost. Celeste's obsession with status, her cruelty masked as life lessons. It all makes sense now. Everything was a facade to bury the past and hide the truth about what she did to my father and to me. He looked back at Celeste, his gaze unwavering. But no more. The truth is out, and you can no longer hide behind your lies. It's time for you to answer for the life you stole from me and the pain you inflicted on so many, including Emma and Richard. Today I stand here not as the broken man you thought you could manipulate, but as Hudson Howard, reclaiming my identity and my future, my rightful place in this world, and I'm here to see that justice is finally served. When Liam, now known as Hudson, finished speaking, the church erupted into chaos. Emma stood frozen, tears streaming down her face as the full weight of his words sank in. Across the room, Celeste had gone pale, trembling and shrinking under the weight of the truth she had worked so hard to bury. Richard stepped away from her, shocked by the revelations, as if truly seeing his wife for the first time, and disliking what he saw. Days after the dramatic scene at the church, the lives of everyone involved had changed drastically. Determined to confirm his identity beyond question, Liam underwent a DNA test with a distant relative of the Howard family. The tension was palpable as everyone awaited the results. On a sunny afternoon, Liam, Emma, and Richard gathered in the lawyer's office. The envelope containing the test results was opened with trembling hands. It's positive, the lawyer announced, his voice cutting through the stunned silence in the room. Liam is, without a doubt, the long-lost son of Jonathan Howard. Emma squeezed his hand, tears of relief and happiness shining in her eyes. Richard, still processing the enormity of it all, placed a comforting hand on Liam's shoulder. Finally, after so many years, the truth had come to light. It's a relief to see clearly after all this, Liam murmured, his voice thick with emotion. And despite everything, maybe we can still find happiness. The consequences for Celeste were swift and severe. Charged with fraud, manipulation, and suspected involvement in Jonathan Howard's death, she faced a lengthy legal battle. Within days, the police arrived at the mansion with a search warrant, and Celeste, still reeling, could only watch as officers combed through every room, seizing documents, computers, and even her beloved brooch, now a key piece of evidence. Eager to make an example of someone so powerful, the prosecutor pushed for a full investigation into Jonathan's mysterious death, which had long ago been ruled an accident. High society, which once revered Celeste, now shunned her as if she were contagious. Invitations to charity events and exclusive gatherings vanished overnight, and her phone stopped ringing. Former friends avoided her on the street, afraid of the stigma that association with her could bring. As the investigation continued, her assets were frozen, cutting her off from the resources she once took for granted. The mansion, once her fortress, now felt like a gilded prison, with reporters camped outside hoping for a glimpse of the disgraced socialite. In a cruel twist of fate, Celeste found herself isolated and helpless, a small taste of the hardships she had inflicted on Liam all those years ago. As the evidence against her mounted, her downfall was all but assured, with the prospect of years behind bars looming ever closer. Meanwhile, Liam and Emma grew closer, bound by the adversity they had faced together. They moved forward, no longer shackled by Celeste's manipulations. In a quiet, intimate ceremony, very different from the spectacle that Celeste had planned, they married, building a life based on genuine love and a shared vision. What if we used our resources to help people who've been where you were? Emma suggested one day, holding his hand. Liam's eyes lit up with emotion and determination. Nothing would make me happier. Let's turn this painful chapter into something positive. In the months that followed, they established a foundation dedicated to helping the homeless and at-risk youth, providing shelter, education, and opportunities for those often forgotten by society. Richard, deeply remorseful for his role in Celeste's schemes, actively joined in their efforts. Liam's story, from beggar to rediscovered heir to a symbol of hope, captivated the public and became a beacon of resilience and redemption. He and Emma tirelessly worked to give others the same second chance he had been given, proving that compassion could turn even the darkest circumstances into a force for good. As the years passed, Liam and Emma continued their work, side by side, impacting countless lives with each act of kindness and cementing their legacy of love, resilience, and hope. Drawn even closer by the adversity they had faced, Liam and Emma exchanged vows in a quiet, intimate ceremony, far different from the spectacle Celeste had once planned. This time, there were no manipulations, no ulterior motives, just true love and a shared purpose. Liam, Emma said, holding her husband's hands with a gentle smile, what do you think about using our combined resources to help those who are in the situation you once were? Liam's eyes sparkled with emotion and determination. Nothing would make me happier, my love. Let's turn this tragedy into something positive. In the months that followed, Liam and Emma established a foundation dedicated to helping the homeless and vulnerable children. They worked tirelessly to provide shelter, education, and opportunities to those often forgotten by society. Richard, deeply regretful for his unwitting role in Celeste's schemes, joined the couple's charitable efforts wholeheartedly. Liam's story, from beggar to rediscovered heir, along with his philanthropic work, captured the public's imagination. He became a symbol of hope and resilience, proving that even the harshest circumstances can be overcome. One peaceful evening, as they watched the sunset from their porch, Liam turned to Emma. You know, for years I felt lost, as if I were searching for something I couldn't name. Now I realize I was searching for this, a home, a purpose, someone to love. Emma smiled, nestling closer to him. And to think it all began with a simple act of kindness on the street. Never underestimate the power of helping someone, Liam. It can change the world. And so, what began as a cruel plot of revenge and humiliation blossomed into a story of love, redemption, and hope. Together, Liam and Emma dedicated their lives to transforming the pain of the past into a brighter future for others. The Howard Harrison Foundation quickly became a powerful force for change in the city. They opened shelters for the homeless, providing not only a roof, but also rehabilitation programs and job training. Abandoned children found loving homes through carefully managed adoption programs, and each year, dozens of young people received scholarships, giving them a chance to escape the cycle of poverty that Liam had known all too well. Their impact spread like ripples through the community, inspiring other wealthy families to reevaluate their priorities. The city, once known for its indifferent elite, began to gain a new reputation for compassion and social progress. Liam, the once lost boy who had become a symbol of resilience, frequently spoke at schools and universities, sharing his story and encouraging others to hold on to hope, no matter their circumstances. Emma, in turn, used her social connections to rally support for causes that high society had previously ignored. Together, they demonstrated that a person's true value lay not in their wealth or status, but in their willingness to lift others up. Their journey became a powerful reminder that even in the darkest times, kindness could prevail and that a single act of compassion could spark profound change. As the years passed, Liam and Emma often looked back with a mix of wonder and gratitude for the path that had led them to this place. What had started as a small act of kindness on a busy street had grown into a movement that changed lives. They continued their work tirelessly, dedicated to making the world better, one act of kindness at a time. Through their efforts, they proved that true love and compassion held the power to overcome even the greatest darkness. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep sharing heartwarming stories with you almost every day. Don't miss the next inspiring narrative coming up on your screen. We're incredibly grateful to have you here, and we've prepared a special selection of stories just for you. Click on the links now for guaranteed inspiration and entertainment. See you there.